Well, good evening and welcome to tonight's live call, which is all about talking about adults' business and really the land of intimate relationships. And the reason why we're getting into this is because, relationships are complicated between adults. And often in these days, I think it's less or just around 50-50 at the moment of adults' relationships actually stay together. So we have a lot of separation, a lot of single parenting, a lot of co-parenting, shared parenting, and sometimes we really need to be able to work out how to form a relationship when we have children involved. And what's really, really important, and what we're going to be covering tonight, is around how to deal with these adult issues so it doesn't affect your children. So it's a little bit of a small shift paradigm, because many of us, well, I know I grew up where my parents didn't share a lot of their problems with me, so I was left in the dark. However, I did know that there were issues going on. So it's a bit of a paradigm shift from either not sharing at all, and then there's some parents that share way too much and lean on their kids for support. And then, so we need to actually come right back into the middle. So we need to share with our kids, but not rely upon them to hold us up, to support us through our tough times. And I'm going to be talking about why that's so important in just a moment. I'm also going to be talking about what makes a lasting relationship and potentially why relationships are breaking down at the moment in quite a significant number. There's some research around it, but there's also some very practical reasons why we're breaking down in relationships now. And talk about breaking the cycle of emotionally burdening our children. It is not their job to support their parents, to provide them with, a cup of tea or a back rub or make us feel better about ourselves. And I'll talk about the dangers of doing that and why that's such a... because I deal with a lot of adults now that have come out of that parenting kind of relationship, and it really is tough for them. And what to do to recognise. So if you've had a fight, you're in the middle of a fight, you're after a fight, or it's after the fact, and you recognise that your child has been affected, and there's some really clear ways as to how you can see the effect on your child, and I'll be talking about how to do that and what to do, especially if your partner or your ex just won't play nice. Now, a lot of this will be also, remember, we will be covering off a lot of the information that we've already covered off in the Peaceful Parenting online course, especially around what happens in that developing emotional brain and what happens for us as adults when we have unintegrated experiences in our childhood and how they come back and haunt us. So a lot of the information you'll find out sort of dovetails with what you've been learning already. It's just we're giving this our focus tonight. Now, I would have spoken probably around about week 1, maybe even week 2, week 3 of our Peaceful Parenting program about a natural order to love in families. Now, this has been observed by research and also by the theory behind family constellations theory, is the fact that there is a natural order to love in families, and that is the very most important element of a family is the parents. So if that relationship is strong, if it is grounded in solid foundations, then parents are able to provide and meet their children's emotional, physical, and spiritual needs. So kids are feeling safe and secure when they can see their parents are working together. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be perfect all the time. In fact, there's no such thing, and it's really important that you let your kids know that it's okay not to be perfect. But we're going to be talking about, the effects of not having a perfect relationship and how you can navigate through some of the pitfalls a bit later on. So the second part of the natural order to love is that children take. That is their role. Even as an adult, if you think about your parents, you're still looking for acceptance, for love, for approval, for support, for a hug from your parents. Even though you might not be living with them any longer, you still are reaching out as that fundamental child looking to take something from your parents until the point that they cannot do it and that we need to step up and help them. And that's in really old age. So kids' jobs, their whole role is to focus on developing the sense of self. And how do they do that? They do that by watching the world around them and by getting messages back about who they are from us, their parents, from other significant people in their family, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, their teachers, their friends. So their whole role is about developing a sense of self. And our role is that little part that says the spiritual needs. It's about developing, helping them to develop a healthy sense of self. Who are they? And validating themselves and making sure that they feel worthy about what they can do in this world. No matter what level they are. They could be autistic, they could be, whatever kind of level child that you have, your role is to help them be the best version of themselves. And in doing that, we also teach them skills, and the skills that they will learn if you stick to the program are all the valuable skills that you're now learning about communication and relationships. We give them that knowledge, we give them the values around that, around healthy families, around themselves, around what is right for them and right for your family. Then they form a healthy set of beliefs and go into adulthood and be resilient adults. So how do we get it wrong? How is it possible with just these simple things that we're supposed to provide our children? How do we get it wrong? Well, I'm going to use an analogy tonight, and I'm going to call it the land of relationships, or his country and her country. So what I want you to think about is that when you first got together with your partner, now keep in mind at the moment what I'm talking about is a man and a woman, but this could equally work for woman and woman, man and man, whatever relationship you have. I'm open to that. It's just identifying that when you meet your partner and the sparks fly and only you can see the good in them and how fantastic they are and how great you feel when you're with them and how much you want to be with them. And it seems that those small little things that might drive us a little bit nuts, we find it's okay, that we figure that we'll be able to surmount the differences and we won't have a big problem about it. But part of actually going into the land and meeting someone and coming to their country. So I'm in my country, I've met the man of my dreams, the woman of my dreams, and they're in their country, is understanding the country. So if you've ever gone to a traveling at all, what's the first thing you do? You might pick up a travel book or a travel brochure about that country and read about it. Why? Because you want to know about the culture. What's their culture? What's the culture of the person that you're getting involved with? What do their family believe in? What are their family customs? Are there rituals that they observe and they don't observe? These are the things that we need to discover when we're looking for good, solid relationships that last, and especially if we're bringing children in the world. And then we're also looking for their beliefs. What do they believe? Are they generally a positive person or a negative person? What are their beliefs around politics or around all of the subjects that are passionate to you? These are the things that you start discussing, and invariably what happens is that you tend to gravitate towards people that share similar beliefs and even similar values, because it's almost really hard to stay in relationship with people that are culturally different, believe completely different things from you, and hold different values. One of you has to shift on some of those or all of them. And the successful people that come from, a wide variety of cultural backgrounds are the ones that are willing to open their land up, open their beliefs up, step into your land, see what works for you, see what works for them, and then invite you into their land, because it is about that. When you marry someone, you're marrying their community, you're marrying their family, you're marrying and be creating a relationship that is based on knowing what you believe is the common understanding between the two of you. So think of yourself as being in your own country, and when you met your partner, you went into their country just for a bit. You dipped your toe in like a traveller. You tried their food, you checked out the sights, you met the people, you liked it, and you decided to settle down. And invariably what that happens is your country then overlaps and you start aligning, forming an alliance. And this is our understanding of each other. It's our relationship. It's based on what we believe is actually there. And here's where we feel safe, because we feel known. We feel understanding each other. However, we all know that the honeymoon eventually ends. And what we believe we knew about the other person suddenly becomes a little bit more clouded. And we start looking at their country as a little bit more foreign again. And we might even separate our countries. And if that happens, then we're in trouble. We need to have a common understanding. Because there's so much that we don't know about the other person. As you can see, we have a small part that is actually overlapping in our relationship. What about the rest of it? What's behind the person we're getting involved in? What don't we know? What's the missing piece of the puzzle that creates the chaos in the relationship that you have? What are we missing? Well, if you've been listening to the parenting program, you would know that when we as a children have unintegrated experiences, so that's an experience where our parents didn't help us deal with the hurt, the confusion, the anger, the fear around a certain trauma or a situation that happened in our childhood. And this happens for everyone. Then we are left with a child's perspective, and it's stuck in our emotional brain, because our upstairs brain is constantly being regenerated, revamped, remodeled, all of those. And we are left with our emotions and not a lot of logic that is, and that's but what I mean by unintegrated. So we don't have the integrated experience of our emotions with the logic, which helps us to understand and make sense of what is going on as children. So as you know, also as part of the program, that when we have a child that is behaving, and I'm putting that in quotes, misbehaving or behaving, whatever it is, they're both in quotes, when they're acting out, when they're quiet, when they're doing something that is not normal, or they're doing it all the time, then generally they have an unmet need that is stuck in that emotional brain. So when we meet our partner, we are also meeting the person that has an extensive history of unintegrated experiences and unmet needs, where they've been hurt, where there's been confusion, where there's been fear, where they've had longing from their parents for love and acceptance and safety and worth, and on occasion it's not been available to them. So it's set their emotional brain up to experience confusion and fear and anger, all of those survival mechanisms that pop up. So when you're meeting someone and your relationship starts going a little bit haywire, and you suddenly see a different side to your partner, where they're angry or they're hurt, or maybe you've seen it from the beginning and you've just been able to hold on until it actually has worn really thin, then you're looking at what your partner has been carrying with them in their land, in their country. So when you're in that experience, what you need to do is to be able to understand, who are you dealing with here? Who exactly are you talking to? Because all of our unmet needs and unintegrated experiences from our own upbringing is what creates that emotional chaos. And really, what we now didn't get from our parents, what we experienced in that relationship, we now look to our partner to fix or provide us. So if we had an experience where we didn't feel loved, where we didn't feel accepted or worthy or safe, then we will often look at our partner unconsciously and seek it in them. And because they don't know what your need is, because you have no idea, this is all unconscious, then they're responding to that, or they're not responding to that in a helpless way. And you both end up being stuck in a level of chaos. So at that point, you're not actually in an effective relationship. In fact, in that point, you're now trying to get your unmet needs from your partner instead of from yourself or from your parents. And your partner's exactly in the same boat. So when they're feeling hurt and confusing and longing, they're looking for something from you that they didn't get from their parents. And it creates that sense of disillusion and frustration, and the inner story is built around what the other person isn't doing right, or what they should provide you, or what they need to do in order to be fixed. And so sometimes women will go on a fix-it mode. You know, he's got to do this, he's got to do that, he's got to do this. Or he might say, well, she's just got to get over it. She's just, shouldn't be so sensitive. So, because that's coming from his place of helplessness. And we often think, if only they'd change. Now, I was only talking to someone today who is going through a separation. And, a separation process is a grieving process. There is 5 stages to it. There's, where you can't accept what's going on. There's anger, there's fear, there's bargaining, and then there's finally there's some sort of acceptance that gets there. However, in the meantime, and even within 5 minutes in a day, you can have all of those experiences and emotions as well. So separation is really, really a very great trigger to bring out that hurt part of you, that is still hanging around from your childhood. So if you were clear, if you were integrated from childhood, most of the time you wouldn't, it would be my theory that people wouldn't even separate, because they would recognize what was going on and they'd be able to resolve their issues. But sometimes, there are people, or at least one person, that is very aware and very clear and very healed as part of their growth, but the other person hasn't. And sometimes that is what is the separation point, where one person has healed and they've moved on, and the other person has not healed and in fact doesn't want to. So they're no longer compatible, because they're no longer on a similar level of relating. We've got one person who is ready to move on and to improve their life and look after themselves, and the other person is still in a lot of pain and hurt and confusion from the unintegrated experiences from childhood. So in reality, what we really need to do is to understand, who are we dealing with when we go into a fight situation or an argument situation. Am I dealing with the adult, or am I dealing with an inner child? And what's their need? So how do we tell what is really something you truly need, or something that your hurt inner child really needs? I'm going to give you an exercise. So if you can, if you're not driving, if you're not, if you're available to do this, if not, turn off the recording and come back when you are ready. But for the moment, what I want you to do is close your eyes and just relax. And take a nice couple of deep breaths. And what I want you to do is imagine your partner or your ex-partner to be in front of you. And just take a moment to really look at them without any judgment. Just look at them. And what I want you to do in a moment is you can say this out loud or you can say it in your mind, but I want you to complete this statement and say it to them. What I really needed from you was... What I really needed from you. And now use the feeling that's associated with that need. What I really needed from you was... Just really recognize what you're looking from them. What do you need from them? And now what I want you to do is we're just going to move your partner off to the left or to the right, it doesn't matter. Because just behind where they were in front of you is a parent of yours. One of them showed up. Which one? Mum or dad? And repeat that same statement to them with all the emotion associated with it. What I really needed from you was... And check in. Was that statement more appropriate for your parent or for your partner? Was it just as true for them as for your partner? And then check in with yourself and find out, how old do you feel? How old are you when you have this need? How old do you feel? If you feel like a child, then you know that this is your hurt inner child speaking. The unintegrated, the confused, the angry and the fearful inner child. It's the one that we need to look after because it's our need and not our partners. They didn't sign up for this. There was nothing in our agreement that said you've got to meet my unmet needs. And by the way, I'm not telling you what they are because I don't know what they are myself. And as a partner on the receiving end of that, so if you've also copped angry, fearful, confusion reactions from your own partner, how painful is that to experience it? It is painful, and it puts you often in the same state, into a state of fear and confusion, which is not helpful. But if you've done the Peaceful Parenting Program, you know what you can do, and we can talk about that briefly in a bit. But it's also really helpful to understand your partner's world. So what I'm going to do is invite you right now to again have your partner in front of you and imagine them in their own land, in their own country. So there's a clear separation. This is your country, they're in their country. And I want you to step out of your country and go and step in their country and have a look around. See what it feels like. How do they feel in their country? Did they have a good experience? What was their relationship like with mum and dad? What are their struggles? What are their challenges? Where did they come from? When you're there, can you really empathise with what they went through? Or do you need more understanding? Because this is what you need to talk about. The more that you understand your partner's world, the more that they understand your world, the less likely you are to fight. Without a doubt. The more that you're willing to explore their world, the more that they are willing to explore your world. And you both recognize, I've got my own little hurt child with all this unintegrated stuff that she's having to deal with. And you've got your own little child with all your unintegrated and unmet needs. And I can see it. I can tell now when you step into your child's space. I can tell who's running the show, who's running the country, the child or the adult. And when that happens, and I do something slightly differently from what I would have done before, because I understand the benefits behind my new approach, which is empathy and connecting with you and feeding back what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. And I'm owning my stuff. I know when I've stepped into my child. And I know when you've stepped in your child, and that is your stuff. And I'm okay with that. I just help you and support you using all the skills that we've learnt, the listening, the empathy, the negotiation, the problem solving, being real, and some of the other techniques, the tapping, the mindfulness, the stepping into your shoes so that I can understand what's going on for you. I now have a greater appreciation for what you've endured and also for what you're bringing to the relationship in a positive way. When you use that approach, you have a new understanding and a new way of relating to each other that is not based on all of the unmet needs and the unintegrated experiences. In other words, your baggage. You're not carrying your baggage on your shoulder. You're not trying to give it to someone else, to your partner, to fix, to take off your shoulders, because it's your baggage. In fact, they didn't even know you had that baggage. They married you because they loved you, baggage and all, but they didn't know about the baggage. So if you explore it together and support each other, then you end up having a really great, warm, loving, connected relationship where you don't need to fix each other. You don't need to tell a person to go and fix themselves. They do it automatically through the space that you create now in your relationship. So you need to think about, with that new understanding, you may not want to look at new ways of relating, and what do you want to put into that relationship that honours you and your family, that respects each other and provides a way of helping and supporting the other person when their hurt little child shows up. And by doing this, that teaches your own children about how to relate to each other when things are good and when things are bad. And that also restores that natural order where your relationship as the parents is the number one priority. Because when you two are working well together and relating, your children feel safe. And you know this because if you've had a little bit of a tiff, if you're one of those people that goes to bed angry and doesn't make up before you go to sleep, and the next morning you get up and you're both grumpy with each other and you're stomping around the house, your kids know. They'll show you that they know. And I'll talk about how they do that. But with this new way of relating, of understanding that when I'm looking at my partner and they've blown up at me, oh, your child's shown up. Okay, so what do I need to do? I need to empathise. So you're really angry with me right now, aren't you? What I just said really bothered you. And feeding back to them what you're hearing, what your understanding is, clarifying their need, restoring their emotions, and then saying, okay, what can we do about that? You're not owning it, you're not trying to fix it, you're not saying, well, I'm sorry, or you're not saying, I'm sorry, when you're not really sorry. So you're actually relating in a way that's authentic, it's real, and it respects and honors what the other person is coming to you with. But it also understands and knows when you faced your partner's little hurt inner child. So if you put all of that into your relationship, what do you need to leave out that hurts your relationship? How do you avoid shaming each other, criticizing, moralizing, demoralizing, questioning or interrogating them? How do you help each other through that situation? And how do you avoid all of the negative stuff that you may have been doing up until now? And how do you help your children navigate through the tough times when, someone's had a bad day or there is separation on the cards? How do you navigate through that? We really need to be able to teach our children how to think and not what to think. So it's a really important way of checking to make sure that our child is not in a state of disintegration. So when they're emotional overwhelm, when that tsunami of emotions has hit, what do? We face that with our empathy, with our understanding, listening to them, connecting with them, so that they know that you understand what they're going through and that you can help them. Now keep in mind, the research has shown that it's actually absolutely okay to fight in front of your children. What your kids really need to know and to be assured of is that all emotions are okay, and that the greatest reassurance in that case is that you handle the arguments with your partner and resolve it in front of your children so they can see the whole process. The blow up, the anger, you managing that anger, responding to it with your empathy, with listening, then problem solving, clarifying, negotiating a way forward. And then eventually, hopefully, apologies as well. So your kids are learning by watching you. Now, if you have arguments that are not resolvable, and some of them are not, for example, the person I spoke to today, they're in separation mode. They will split, and that is inevitable. It's on the cards. Then you need to be able to help your kids not to feel the burden of your adult issues, of your adult decisions. And you need to be able to look for signs that they're in a state of disintegration. So their emotional brain is full force, they're out of control, they're feeling the fear. And some of those signs include confusion. Now, confusion is a form of freeze. And if you're an adult, you might even recognize that sometimes you go into a point of confusion. It is a safety mechanism for you. It's a pattern. It helps you to check out, to leave, to take your mind elsewhere. And children often do this when they're faced with something they don't understand. Whether that's at home, watching their parents having an argument, or it might be at school, learning something that is difficult for them to take on. They will freeze, or they'll go into a state of confusion. They'll go into la-la land. So if your children go a bit quiet, if you ask them to do something and they're not quite there, then that's a sign that something's happening for them. The opposite of that is the fix-it child, the child that tries to either help you resolve it. They'll run around trying to help you. They might even try to make you laugh because it makes everyone happy and it brings them their level of distress down as well. They might sit there and go into over-analysing. Now, many adults go into analysis paralysis too. It's another form of your brain taking over. The survival mechanism is based in fear. It's trying to find a resolution. It's trying to resolve your parents' problems, and you may have done that as a child. Now, I just spent a whole weekend with people, and one of those constellations that I witnessed was a young woman who was caught in the middle between her parents' divorce and her mother's absolute collapse and depression. And this little 11-year-old girl had to step up and start parenting. And she had to start fixing and resolving issues for her mother, whether that was to get her a cup of tea, to make sure she got up and had a shower that day or had something to eat, whether it was, something that had to be relayed to her father or vice versa. This child was put in the middle, and her response was to be on top of it all, to be on the ball, to be absolutely spot on. And as an adult, that creates havoc because it sets up a pattern that is really hard to break. So she's constantly trying to please everyone, to make sure that everyone, and she fears making the wrong decision. She goes into analysis paralysis over the smallest things. She fears not being able to make the right decision in case she upsets someone. We want to avoid that for our children. So if your child starts wanting to fix it or make you happy or, make you laugh in some way to try and get you out of your mood, then you need to be able to follow the steps I'm going to talk about shortly. Now, the last one is often one where parents miss, which is the anger. In some way, your child starts acting out in unexpected ways, or just it increases. Their normal way of acting out might be to hit or bite their brother or whatever it is, but suddenly they're doing it a lot. And it's based on, you've just had a fight with your partner the night before. And even though the kids were in bed, they know, as we've spoken about as part of the program, the energy that you carry is something that the heart reads. So your child is reading your body's energy all the time and will know if there's problems with the parents. So if they say to you, "Are you okay, mummy?" and you say, "I'm fine," and you're not, they're going to know. The sensitive ones are. Now, there are some children that are completely oblivious to it, which is really fortunate for you. But there are some kids that are incredibly sensitive to it. And I knew one family that had one of both, and the parents actually hated each other, staying together for the kids. And yet one of the children knew, even though the parents were always civil to each other and nice to each other, she knew. And she was constantly checking in with mum to see if mum was okay. And then she would be constantly rude and angry with mum because she was confused and didn't know what was going on. So there's the signs of distress. You need to keep your eyes out for them. The confusion, the going into fix it or analysis mode, or going into anger where they start acting out towards other people or children. So what do you need to do when you recognize it? Name it to tame it. So empathy, name the situation. Let them know what's going on. Don't keep them in the dark. You can tell them, Mummy and Daddy had a fight. You don't need to go into the details. You can say, that's okay. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes we don't get along well. Sometimes we argue about something and we're in the process of sorting it out. Set clear boundaries with them. It's Mummy and Daddy's business. You really don't need to worry. If your child is still worried, you can talk to them about that. It feels scary that we're in anger, doesn't it? It feels scary that we're not talking to each other. You don't like it. It's uncomfortable. And they might start voicing what their fears are. And because there's a lot of kids around that are coming from broken relationships, they might fear that you're going to break up. So you need to assure them if you can, or if you can't assure them, if you're in the middle of, splitting, then you need to be able to say, be really clear with them about the boundaries. Say it's okay, whatever happens, we still love you. Everything will be okay. And we will try and make sure that, everything works to our best ability for everyone's sake. So set the clear boundaries. If they're starting to feel burdened, if they're always looking after you, and trying to make you happy, help them to hand that burden back. One way you can do this is go and find a really big heavy rock. And you ask them to hold on to the rock, holding it in their little hands, and say, what you're holding on to is all of Mummy and Daddy's worries, fears, anger, everything else that you would like to go away. Yes? And so they can understand that. Yeah, okay. So that's what it feels like when you're holding Mummy and Daddy's problems. And then you can say to them, I don't want you to hold my problems. I don't want you to think that you have to solve them. It's actually okay for you to put it down. You don't need to do this. And encourage them to give it back to you, or at least put it down, so that they can recognize when they're starting to feel like they're out of control and they need to fix something or hurt someone, or to name their emotions, help them to identify the burden that they've started to take on. And a really important point here is that if you're in conflict with your partner, if you're even in the process of separation, divorce, stay loyal to that parent. If you need to vent to another adult outside and away from your children. Don't do it while they're around, even in the house. It's really important that you do that. I made that huge mistake once when my boy was really young. I was still young myself and I didn't like his dad. And I was on the telephone to my friend, venting. And he came down the hallway and the look on his face was so angry and so annoyed with me. I immediately said to my girlfriend, I'm sorry, I've got to go. And then I went and apologized profusely to him. I learnt my lesson. I never ever spoke down about his father ever again. My venting went to other adults away from him so that he didn't have to deal with my emotions. It's really important that you do that, because one other really important factor is if there's an element of something that you don't respect or accept in your partner, because your child came from both of you, unconsciously they start thinking, well, if you don't like him or her, then there's a part of me you don't like, because I came from him and her. So don't give them that idea that there's something wrong with them. So stay loyal to the other parent. So that's really important. If you're going to fight in front of your kids, fight fair. And if you don't fight fair, if you start criticizing and name calling and all of that sort of stuff, clear that up and start making an agreement to stop doing that to each other. Our role is to give our children roots, so ground them into feeling safe, secure, accepted, and loved. And our other role is to give them wings, to go out in this world and navigate it. And the way that they do that is by watching how we do it. So this quote by Virginia Satir, who's a very, very respected family therapist: feelings of worth can flourish only in an atmosphere where individual differences are appreciated, mistakes are tolerated, communication is open, and rules are flexible. The kind of atmosphere that is found in a nurturing family. That's what we need to do. So own up to your issues. Be real. Identify your mistakes. Be open with your communication. And be really clear about your boundaries. Whose stuff is this? This is my stuff. This is your stuff. This is not our kids' stuff. Now, if you're in absolute chaos and you've sunk into what's called the parent tantrum, where you've lost your cool. Now, this applies for either whether you're losing your cool with your partner or losing your cool with your children. Stop. Stop. Catch yourself. Stop acting, stop speaking, stop talking, stop judging, stop criticizing, stop moralizing, dictating and questioning. Stop it. Give yourself some time out. Now, if you need to do something that reminds you to do that, so whether you wear one of those wristbands with a word on it that says stop, whether you have an image around you where you normally lose your cool, something that reminds you to give yourself some time out. If you can't, then count. Do the mindfulness breathing. Look away. You just need a moment, just a moment. You don't need to respond straight away. If you can't leave the room, if you need to plug your ears, do that until you calm down. Close your eyes, calm down. Put all of your attention into your breathing, all of your attention into what you're doing. That mindfulness process. So if you're making dinner, make sure you feel every aspect of what you're doing, what you're touching, what you're smelling, what you're seeing, to bring yourself back to the present. If you can't do that, go and tap. And if you don't know what tapping is, then you need to go and find out what it means. Then take the time to organize your thoughts. What is the reality here? What is actually happening? What's the truth? How do you say something or not do something to hurt someone and shame them? And how old do you feel in the fight? How old are you? And once you've got that, reflect on what's your underlying need here. What triggered this? Because behind the trigger is the need. And how will you know how to stop the next time this comes up? Let me give you a hint. Address the need. What's your need and what's theirs? So take a moment to step into their country again and see what sparked them off. What's their need? What's my need? And what is your I message? So how do you assert your needs? How do you ask for what you want in a way that they will hear it? And what will you do to prevent this situation from happening again? So when you're in that calming and planning stage, do it for both you, the person, who's either sparked up. You can do it for the person you're having the fight with. And you can also do it for any child who's witnessed it. What's my child's need? They've just seen us have a fight and we've resolved it, but they're still a bit disintegrated. What do they need? Put yourself into their shoes for a moment. Check in. Is they feeling safe and secure? No, they're feeling really scared. All right, so go and address that. Name it to tame it. We just had a fight and it really scared you, didn't it? You don't like mummy and daddy yelling, do you? You'd rather us get along all the time. Once their emotions have been addressed, then you can say, mummy and daddy, sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we get stuff off our chest, but we just sorted it out. We worked it out, so we've got a way forward. It's okay. So you can let them know that everything is okay. And if they're still distressed, talk about it. Remember, the younger the child, use the storytelling technique. So using that process to actually go from the beginning of the story to the end, and give them the bigger picture of what's going on so that they understand. And also you can give them a way out and to put any burden that they've taken on and to put it down. Okay, so I want to leave you with one more quote before I open to questions, if you've got any. I want to love you without clutching, appreciate you without judging, join you without invading, invite you without demanding, leave you without guilt, criticize you without blaming, and help you without insulting. If I can have the same from you, then we can truly meet and enrich each other. And that's essentially the basis of a good relationship, where you can express yourself freely without hurting the other person, where they can express themselves freely without fear of your defense, because you can sit, you can accept it, but you don't necessarily have to believe in it. You can just listen to it, listen to what's their experience, and be able to move on from that. That's the ideal. That's pretty much where my relationship is now. There's certainly very, very rare any kind of arguments. And that's taken a lot of work together, a lot of my healing, a lot of his healing, and now we're at the point where we just, if anything difficult comes up, we do exactly that. We appreciate each other, we don't judge each other, we don't blame, we accept ourselves, we accept our inner child, we recognize when that comes up and we talk about it, we own it, we get real. So hopefully that helps you. So if you've got any questions, and you can ask them now, and you can also, if you have any questions, ask me in the Facebook group as well, even after this, anytime that you've listened to this, even if it's weeks down the track. Ask me a question. I'm more than happy to help. So are there any questions?
I don't think I have any questions, Vanessa.
Great.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I came in late and that's really helpful.
Oh, good. Good. All right. Well, great, Heidi. Have a great night then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
No.